This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Friday, August 28th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. We begin our broadcast with the coronavirus pandemic and how it serves as a reminder of the need to boost healthcare across Africa. Sisipo Sikweya has the details.
As the World Health Organization reports that the COVID-19 outbreak appears to be slowing across Africa, health ministers and representatives from the continent's countries have stressed that the disease is a poignant reminder of the need to boost health systems. At the WHO's annual Regional Committee for Africa, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said Africa quickly felt the impact of the pandemic due to weak health systems and the highest disease burden in the world.
COVID-19 has taught us that strong health systems are a matter of national security and survival.
A WHO assessment has recommended a number of measures, including that governments find ways to increase public funding for healthcare. On Wednesday, the UN body also reported a 7% decrease in cases of the new coronavirus across the continent compared with the week before. While the decline is encouraging, it said the data should be treated cautiously as it could be affected by a number of factors, including testing strategy and delays in reporting. Former virus hotspots seeing a fall in cases included South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, Gabon, Madagascar and Zambia, but the trend was not universal. The countries seeing the biggest increases, Uganda and Rwanda, with 184% and 137% rises respectively. In total, Africa has seen more than 1.2 million cases of COVID-19 with 930,000 recoveries and over 28,000 deaths.
That was Sisipo Sikweya of Reuters with that report. Stranded for months because of the coronavirus pandemic, many cruise ship workers have been living in hotels since March. Some of them are immigrants who just want to return home. VOA's Jose Panalete in Miami filed this report, narrated by Christina Smith.
Paul Cordova traveled to Miami from Peru in March for medical treatment and a spine operation. He's still here. He was forced to stay put when travel stopped and flights to Peru were canceled. He is one of the thousands of cruise ship workers who are living in hotels. For now, from his bedroom window, he watches flights to other destinations take off.
Sí, al inicio ha sido bastante fuerte.
It has been quite difficult and very hard to turn around and see planes leaving and taking off, to think that I can be there, traveling and returning home.
Y pensar que uno pueda estar ahí, viajar, regresar.
He says he does the same things every day as he waits for the chance to go home.
Tomar los alimentos juntos.
We talk during dinner all the time. I call my family and we share every meal together.
Conectados de esa manera.
According to the U.S. Coast Guard, there are still more than 50 cruise ships anchored in local ports, with crew members on board under COVID-19 restrictions.
Yes, there are still thousands of crew members stuck on cruise ships waiting to go home. Since March, it's been a logistical challenge for the cruise lines to get the crew members home. Slowly, they've been going home since mid-March, but there are still thousands on board.
Cordova recently received word from Royal Caribbean, the company he used to work for, bought him a ticket back to Peru for this coming 1st of September.
Nadie sabe si en esa fecha el aeropuerto estará abierto.
Nobody knows if the airport is going to be open, but the flight is purchased.
VOA reached out to Royal Caribbean for comment to explain the delay in the purchase of tickets for its stranded employees. The company did not respond to our request. For Jose Pernalete in Miami, Cristina Caicedo Smith, VOA News.
European governments are preparing to reopen schools in the coming days for the new academic year, as health experts say it's vital for children to resume education. Most students have not attended school for 6 months after COVID-19 lockdowns were imposed in March to contain the pandemic. As Henry Ridgwell reports, some teacher unions are voicing concerns for the safety of staff as infection rates continue to rise.
It was back to school for Britain's Prime Minister.
The schools are safe, and it is fantastic to see pupils coming back, see our kids coming back to school.
And the risk of reopening schools, British scientists say, overwhelmingly favours bringing students back.
The chances of children catching COVID and then getting long-term serious problems as a result of it, solely due to going to school, are incredibly small. The evidence that not going to school damages children in the long run is overwhelming, and that includes their long-term chances.
In a policy reversal this week, Britain says all high school pupils must now wear masks in communal areas, but not in classrooms. A similar rule will also apply in France, where all adults and students from 6th grade and above will have to wear masks. Italy is basing its school reopening policy around testing for teachers and pupils.
It is clear that in cases where you have a bigger cluster, you will have to close down the school if necessary, or just the class, or the children will remain at home.
Spain last week recorded its highest number of weekly infections since the peak of the pandemic. However, deaths remain much lower. The government says reopening schools is a priority.
We owe it fundamentally to mothers, fathers, students, our sons and daughters, teachers and workers that it happens in a safe environment.
Many students will receive their first formal education in 6 months. Health experts say it's vital to get children back in classrooms that are safe for both students and teachers.
Evidence does show that the transmission rates are actually higher amongst teachers. So we do need to think about how we can protect teachers as well as pupils, because now we are entering into a global educational crisis with over 1 billion children out of school.
Summer holidays are nearly over, and across Europe there is nervousness as infection rates rise, just as schools and many offices prepare to reopen. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Coup leaders in Mali have released ousted President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta from detention, according to a junta official speaking on Thursday. Adam Reed reports.
Ousted former Mali President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta was released on Thursday, said the coup of leaders who've been keeping him captive for almost 2 weeks. Military officers have been in control of the West African country since detaining Keïta at gunpoint and forcing him to resign. The group, who called themselves the National Committee for the Salvation of the People, said he was freed and returned to his home, although his whereabouts could not immediately be confirmed. According to one local, his residence appeared to be deserted during Thursday, with no sign of the usual security presence. Keïta's release was one demand of Mali's international partners, including France and West African countries, who've taken a hard line over the coup and imposed sanctions. A delegation from West Africa's regional bloc met with the coup leaders last weekend in the capital, Bamako. The CNSP has since said they want to stay in power for a 3-year transition period, according to reports in Nigeria on Wednesday. In contrast, the regional bloc is seeking for a transitional government of no more than 1 year.
That was Adam Reed of Reuters reporting. Malawi has one of the highest rates of early marriage and teenage pregnancy in the world, with about half of girls marrying before the age of 18, according to government records. Aid groups say the coronavirus pandemic's closing of schools is only worsening the trend. Lamek Masina reports from Palombe district in southern Malawi.
This 17-year-old girl, who we will call Rhoda, felt helpless when the government closed the schools in March to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Like many other girls In poor rural areas where schools offer opportunity, Rhoda struggled to find ways to make money.
We instead had to go to places doing piece jobs to earn money. But when the piece jobs became scarce, I had no other option but to start a relationship with a man.
After she became pregnant, the primary school student was kicked out of her home by her parents.
The problem I'm facing is a lack of food and clothes. The man who impregnated me sometimes brings some food, but it's not enough.
The problem of teenage pregnancies is not new in Malawi. Government records show about half of girls marrying before the age of 18. To reverse the trend, the Center for Alternatives for Victimized Women and Children is encouraging youths to access sexual reproductive health services, which include the use of condoms.
We're conducting awareness to these youth as well as their parents, because we managed to establish some youth clubs so that these youth should be meeting in their free time and discuss importance of accessing these SRHR services.
The group is also working with women's groups to help girls leave their marriages and return to school.
There are some girls who were married like Rhoda, but we have managed to withdraw them from the marriage, and now they are back in their homes. Because once a child is married, she rarely has a chance to continue with her education. So we talk to parents about looking after the pregnant girl until she can return to the school.
While the date for reopening schools remains uncertain, authorities in Malawi are urging health facilities to offer free contraceptive services to help protect girls from early pregnancies. Lamek Masina for VOA News, Palombe, Malawi.
Pride Afrique, a 3-day virtual extravaganza celebrating Africa's diverse, colorful community of sexual minorities, was the first of its kind. But behind the glitz and glam, participants say there's a very serious need to bring queer Africans into the light, as their lives are threatened on the continent every single day. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Johannesburg.
Gay. Oh, what gay?
They're here, they're proud, and no pandemic is going to get in the way. This year's inaugural Pride Afrique Festival, a celebration of Africa's rainbow of sexual minorities, was held virtually over 3 days this month, amid restrictions across the continent that prohibit large gatherings. About 1,000 people tuned in digitally on YouTube. Festival committee member Welcome Lichiva says that while the event may look fun and glamorous, its underlying message is serious.
I think it's 72 countries in the world criminalize homosexuality, and 32 of them are in Africa. So it is very important to have initiatives like Pride Afrique, where queer people in Africa can come together to reclaim their power, to reclaim their voice, and to reclaim their pride. Reports still show that queer people are still living difficult lives in relation to everyone else, even in South Africa. Out of the 72
Shiva brought up several recent examples, including a continuing epidemic of violence against lesbians and trans women in South Africa, which was the first African country to decriminalize homosexuality. During the 3-day event, dozens of participants shared their experiences of coming to terms with their gender and sexuality. Those rang especially true for festival participant Noni Salma, who spoke to VOA via Google Hangouts from her home in New York. Salma, a filmmaker, says attitudes in her native Nigeria keep her from feeling comfortable there. She is transgender, and her work has explored themes of homosexuality in Africa.
I think it's important to see African queer people being joyful, because I think it's revolutionary. I think it's as important as, highlighting our trauma and our pain. I think that's magic. I don't want to discount what that could do for queer people in Africa who are struggling and who do not see that, who don't even know that that's a thing.
Professor Jean Nel says visibility is the first step towards acceptance. He recalled South Africa's first known Pride Parade in 1990, held before homosexuality was decriminalized. The 100 or so participants wore bags over their heads to conceal their identities out of fear of retribution. Nell, a psychologist, studies violence against sexual minorities and is lobbying South Africa's government for new legislation that will track and classify such crimes as hate crimes. He says many problems stem from the notion, which he and other academics and historians say is incorrect, that homosexuality is un-African.
In an African context, a lot of the pushback, if you want to call it, would be based on outdated colonial laws, a tendency to scapegoat during political conflicts, perhaps a religiosity that is quite evident in much of Africa. We have rigid beliefs in cultural and family values.
And in these lonely times of social distancing, Lashiva says Pride Afrique gave him something he badly needed.
Yeah, it really suddenly feels like I have a new family, and my personhood, my dignity, and my rage against homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia has been affirmed by Pride Afrique, because I know there are people out there like me.
That's what matters, he says, to be proud, safe, happy, and accepted at home in Africa. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, One Trouser. That's the title of our Song of the Week. We'll be right back.
Times change for political parties and the people who support them. Abraham Lincoln was the first U.S. president from the Republican Party. He led the country through the Civil War that preserved the Union and ended slavery. After the war, newly enfranchised African-American male voters supported the Republican Party, which was committed to civil rights for the recently emancipated. At the same time, the Democratic Party included white supremacists who opposed civil rights for black citizens. But during the 20th century, things began to change. Democrat Franklin D. Roosevelt, first elected in 1932, made his party more appealing to African Americans. FDR took measures to lead the country out of an economic depression. And while that was happening, civil rights became less important to many Republicans. African American support for FDR spiked in 1936, and support for Democratic presidential candidates has remained strong ever since. Another shift happened in the 1960s. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed with support from both parties at the urging of Democratic President Lyndon B. Johnson. After those votes, white segregationist Democrats fled the party in large numbers, creating Republican majorities across the South. The modern political landscape is now almost a reverse image of the one that existed more than a century ago, with African Americans overwhelmingly supporting the Democrats and Republicans backed predominantly by whites.
Welcome back to Africa 54. U.S. President Donald Trump concluded the final night of the Republican National Convention with an acceptance speech delivered in front of a live audience of about 1,500 people on the South Lawn of the White House. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has this recap.
On Thursday night, President Donald Trump repeated a theme he delivered in his 2016 convention speech and his 2017 inauguration.
This election will decide whether we save the American dream or whether we allow a socialist agenda to demolish our cherished destiny.
Following all her adult siblings who spoke earlier this week, Ivanka Trump introduced her father.
Tonight, I stand before you as the proud daughter of the people's president.
As the country continues to roil with social unrest and street violence, Trump emphasized law and order, trying to make the case that former Vice President Joe Biden is a Trojan horse controlled by the far-left wing of the Democratic Party.
Joe Biden is weak. He takes his marching orders from liberal hypocrites who drive their cities into the ground while fleeing far from the scene of the wreckage.
Both Democrat and Republican conventions have been criticized as focusing too much on character, glorifying their nominee and vilifying the opponent, and not enough on policy.
That's particularly true, I think, of the RNC's convention. We still haven't heard a clear sense about what are the issues that this president wants to tackle. There's a vague promise in the background that, well, he once delivered a roaring economy, he'll bring it right back. But not with any details on how he would do that or how he would finally tamp out this pandemic.
Less than one-third of Americans approve of Trump's handling of the pandemic. He delivered his defense in front of 1,500 people, mostly maskless and sitting close together. The majority were not tested for COVID-19.
Trump's speech marked the end of a Republican National Convention which broke with tradition and protocols, including his decision to hold some events at the White House, which some have criticized as an ethics violation, blurring the line between campaigning and governing. The convention targeted Trump's base, as well as groups showing low support for him, women and minorities, including a speech by Alice Johnson, a black woman whose life sentence for drug charges Trump commuted, and Ann Dorn, widow of a retired black officer killed during a protest.
You had Alice Johnson, who humanized, put a face on criminal justice reform, and I think there was the most moving speech of the night was Ann Dorn. And again, putting a face and putting emotion to the law and order messaging that can often sound a little harsh, but I thought she really kind of hit it home and would hit it out of the ballpark with suburban voters.
As Trump spoke, protesters demonstrated outside the White House, a sign that the country will remain polarized as it heads to the November election. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
The March on Washington focusing on police violence is taking place in the U.S. Capitol on Friday. The event comes 57 years after the historic March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, during which Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his iconic I Have a Dream speech. This year's march follows months of demonstrations denouncing police violence against Black people. Those protests were triggered by the death in May of George Floyd, a Black man who died after a white police officer kept his knee on Floyd's neck as he laid prone on a street in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Floyd's death has come to symbolize the long history of deaths of Black people in the U.S. while in police custody or being apprehended by the police. Earlier this week, a police officer shot Jacob Blake, a 29-year-old Black man in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Blake is now paralyzed from the waist down. Friday's event will begin on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and hours later, demonstrators will march to the Martin Luther King Memorial. It's time for our entertainment report and some great music. Here's the host of Music Time in Africa, Heather Maxwell, along with Kwame Ofori. Today they have for us the African Song of the Week. Hi, guys.
Hi, Esther. Hello, everyone. Song of the week is One Trouser by Nigerian rapper, songwriter, and actor Falz. Now, this video was just released August 21st, and it basically tells the story of a typical yet fictitious traffic jam, and Jimmy is in the middle of it, and he is not happy.
Of course he's not. Typical Lagos rage. Let's jump right in.
So this is a super fun video. We're watching it by Falz. But one more question for you, Kwame. Maybe you can answer it for me. Why do you think the title is called One Trouser?
Well, I mean, I don't know what he was going for. It could mean anything. But from my Ghanaian pidgin perspective, in Ghana, when we say me and you go wear one trouser, it means you and I are in the same boat. You and I are going to be in a situation. So maybe that's what he's trying to cut across, but I'm not sure, because with Falz and his deepness, anything is possible.
That was One Trouser by Falls, a brand new video release from Nigeria. I'm Heather Maxwell.
And I'm Mr. Asante here for you now and always.
And that was
Song of the Week.
That was One Trouser by Falls. Thanks, Heather and Kwame. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.
Being part of Our Voices is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them
and bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.